The internet was once hailed as the great equalizer. It would allow knowledge to be accessible to all. Despots would quiver as information flowed freely and humanity rose together, like Jesus ascending to the heavens. Of course, all of those prophecies would soon become utter falsehoods, just another progressive daydream. The internet only divided us more, and as social media burst onto the scene, those fragmentations and echo chambers only grew. Misinformation was king, and knowledge became weaponized. Those of us in the shadows were able to create and join online communities, connect with others who shared our dark beliefs. These connections eventually moved offline, and that is how the town of Slaughtersburg came to be. Now, if you look on the map, you'll never find Slaughtersburg. That is just what the locals call it. Slaughtersburg is located in an isolated, rural stretch of southeastern Wyoming. A smattering of houses and a single general store overlooking windswept grasslands. We are a community of about 50 men, women, and children, offspring of the residents. Everyone in Slaughtersburg, except children under 18, are all serial killers. Every last one of us. Slaughtersburg serves as a home base and hideout in between hunts. A place where we can fully relax and speak freely about our accomplishments. For those who choose, it is also a place to raise a family. Residents and their children are strictly off limits. Everybody has a code. Rivalries are prevalent, and we often try and one-up each other. Ego and pride, to some, is everything, and to others, it is a weakness to exploit. Body count is worn like a badge of honor, one of our few status symbols. Ben, better known as the Detroit Devil, has sat atop that throne for almost a decade. But a new and eager challenger emerged in the last year, and she was able to cut into his lead with remarkable speed. Her name was Jenna, better known as the Blue Lipstick Killer, a nod to her signature. Jenna was a deviant, sadistic beyond belief, but that didn't make her fate any less tragic, maybe even more so. On the eve of our 5th annual town founding celebration, Jenna was found brutally murdered behind the general store, left to bleed out in the trash. Our town's oldest resident, known worldwide as the Zodiac Killer, was the one who stumbled upon the grisly scene. News quickly traveled through Slaughtersburg, and an emergency meeting was called. We gathered in a recently renovated barn that sat on Ben's property. A meeting of the damned, and that's what we dubbed our town meetings. They were often a raucous occasion, a cornucopia of personalities like you wouldn't believe. But on this night, we were rather silent, studying each other like we study our prey. Ben was the first to speak. You want to hear a good joke? A room full of murderers trying to solve a murder. Irony in its purest form. As usual, Ben fell back to his goofy persona, flashing that strikingly handsome smile, one that had lured so many young women into a terrible fate. It was a mask, but it was a damned good one. You probably fucking done it. Mama told me you probably done it. Not everybody in Slaughtersburg was intelligent, especially not John, aka the Cincinnati Maniac. But his brute strength and access to weapons made him a valuable member of the community. And just like the broken clock, on a rare occasion it gets something right, or so we perceive it to be. A murmur grew through the crowd. Ben was an egomaniac more than any of us. He relished media attention, often writing long and winding manifestos to local journalists and police. We all knew that Jenna's rapid ascent had cut him deep, even if he didn't show it. But at the same time, Ben had proudly helped find our community and was committed to the rules unlike anybody else. "Shut your mouth, you goddamn Neanderthal. I'll cut you open like a freaking pig." Ben's rage flashed, his true self. Biting his lip to the point of drawing blood, he composed himself and he slipped back on his mask. "People, it's true. I held resentment for Jenna, and if she wasn't one of us, I would have killed her long ago. But this community has done so much for all of us, allowed us to do things that we never dreamed possible. I would never risk that for some petty rivalry. I know the world over, just the utterance of my name will spark fear in the hearts of even the most hardened men. I have no need to prove myself, so why kill Jenna?" Just like the rest of us, Ben was highly manipulative. He could stab you in the heart and then convince you that the knife was there before he had arrived. His mental powers were almost mythical. But unlike the rest of the populace, my ability to distinguish between truth and bullshit was far better than even prison shrinks. Ben wasn't bullshitting. "If you didn't do it, then who did? Please enlighten us with your theories, O chosen one." A voice dripping in sarcasm shouted from the back of the crowd. An elderly man pushed forward, cane in hand. "Because from where I'm looking, it's pretty clear. Who else had the motive? Who else had an ego so large they would ruin everything we built over pride? There's only one." A bony finger, shaking with anger, pointed directly at Ben. The old man was one of the originals, a serial killer before there was such a term. His words carried weight. Others in the crowd began to nod in agreement, slowly tightening the circle around Ben. The energy in the room became frantic, like a pack of hyenas closing in on their prey. A knife flashed, and then another, and then the crowd surged forward. "Get the hell away from me! Do you know who I am? I'll gouge your eyes out and feed them to your children." Ben's words were cut short, as he was stabbed repeatedly from every angle. For a moment, he stood there proudly, unwavering, staring coldly into the crowd before falling to his knees. A final smile flashed across his face, before collapsing into a heap. A chorus of cackles filled the room, the joy of the kill. We all reveled in violence, but it felt wrong to me. If I felt he was guilty, I would have been on the front of the line, but I felt anything but. "Will somebody get that damn kid out of here? Also, if you would like to dispose of the body, come see me in a few minutes. I know there will be many takers." A young child, no older than 9, stood grinning in the back of the room. As soon as we took notice, he flew out the doors and out into the cold night. It wasn't a child that I recognized, but children were often kept out of sight in Slaughtersburg. The following morning, I was awoken suddenly by a shrieking woman. Pulling on my pants, I rushed outside to investigate the commotion. Stayed to a wooden cross, stomach filleted like a roasted pig, was John, the Cincinnati maniac. His skin was pale white, and copious amounts of blood were spilled around him. He had been bled dry. A series of phrases had been etched, presumably with a knife, into his chest, over and over again. Mama was wrong. In most small towns, multiple murders in a short period of time would cause panic. But we weren't most towns. To leave would be to admit defeat. To show fear would be to show weakness. Slaughtersburg was not the normal populace. our virtues and rules were far different than most. The killings were seen as a challenge, a direct affront to our way of life. Although no one left, it didn't mean things remained unchanged. The status quo had been forever altered. Suspicions grew, and we became extremely wary of each other. People remained shuttered in their homes, carefully analyzing their surroundings. Only the dimwits paraded around town as if their shit shone brightly, oblivious to the changing atmosphere. On a cool Sunday evening, I gathered a handful of supplies from the general store. I exchanged a silent glance with Zodiac, his wrinkled arms trembling slightly behind the wooden counter. His frail body was a constant reminder of the fate that awaited us all. Just a worthless old man. It was hard to believe he was once one of the world's most feared men, a ruthless and intelligent killer who evaded capture for decades. Few knew that he was also the Freeway Phantom and the Bible Belt Strangler. He truly refined the craft. Boom! A gunshot cut through the silence, echoing through the dusk air. Neither Zodiac or I flinched. Instead, walking calmly over to the store windows to peer outside. A woman with wild curly hair held a gun up in the air, a faint trail of smoke rising upwards from the barrel. Her name was Bethany, but you probably know her as the Greenway Savage, one of the most prolific killers of the Southwest. A young boy, no more than 10 years old, was frozen in his tracks, watching Bethany intently with cold eyes. "Why were you at my house, boy? What were you looking for? You have 10 seconds to answer me before I take out your freaking kneecap." Bethany was clearly drunk, her body swaying as she spoke, as if the ground was uneven. The boy stood motionless, as still as a statue. It was at that point that I had a spark of recognition. It was the same boy from the town meeting the other night. Whose kid is this? The words bounced around my mind like a racquetball. "I'm gonna give you one more chance, kid. Why the hell were you snooping around my house?" Bethany's voice cracked, her words slurred by the alcohol. The young boy didn't even flinch, a slight smile crossing his lips. Bethany didn't hesitate, the rage inside of her bursting forth. She pulled the trigger, and then pulled it again and again and again. But to her dismay, she was repeatedly met with an empty click. The boy smiled again, pulling his right hand out of his pocket, his fist balled up. Slowly, he opened his hand to reveal a small pile of bullets, seemingly the same caliber as Bethany's weapon. Rage still boiling over, Bethany charged towards the young boy, practically foaming at the mouth. But the boy was too fast, and he sprinted off easily, quickly disappearing behind a dilapidated barn. Something isn't right here, I thought to myself. Somehow that boy was connected to the murders. I felt it in my soul. Well, whatever you would call it. I didn't suspect he was the perpetrator. There was no way such a young child could have slaughtered a brute like the Cincinnati maniac. His involvement was still unclear. But I don't believe in coincidence, and my intuition had been honed sharply over many hunts. I turned around to ask the Zodiac what he thought. He was one of the few left in Slaughtersburg willing to engage in conversation. But he was gone, the store completely empty. The old man is probably napping, I hoped. These were dangerous times, so all possibilities floated through my mind. Not lingering too long on the fate of the others, I placed several $20 bills on the counter, took my goods, and cautiously walked back to my home. That night, I was awoken by a panicked pounding on my door. It was so forceful that my hinges began to rattle, the door groaning with every hit. Grabbing the shotgun beneath my bed, I got on all fours and I army crawled into the living room, placing a couch between myself and the door. Peeking around the futon, I aimed my gun forward and I shot it authoritatively. "If you think I'm easy prey, you got another thing coming. Come and get me." During hunts, I used my forceful nature to make my victims submit through fear. I found that the threat of violence is often more effective than violence itself. A chorus of children laughing responded, coming from all sides of the house. It was followed quickly by the pitter-pattering of small footsteps, running back and forth across my porch. There was a large and final thud against the door and the splintering of wood. And then the night went silent. For over an hour, I stood motionless, blending into the shadows with my gun clenched tightly. When I felt confident that the coast was clear, I inched slowly towards my front windows, peeking behind the window curtains with unease. The night was empty, not a soul in sight. Carefully, I opened up the front door, peering around suspiciously. To my great shock, painted in blood on my door was a symbol that any serial killer worth their salt would recognize immediately. It was the symbol made famous by the Zodiac killer. Directly in the middle of the symbol was a buck knife, embedded into the wood and dripping with fresh blood. I entered back into my home, slamming the door loudly behind me. For the first time, I felt my calm demeanor begin to fragment. The cracks in my armor were beginning to show. I was being toyed with, like a cat playing with a mouse before sinking its teeth into the jugular. I was the alpha. I sat atop the food chain. I would not allow such transgressions to stand. Slowing my breathing, I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor. Closing my eyes, I took the knife and cut deeply into my scar-infested chest. Before I committed pain onto others, I first inflicted pain onto myself. This was the way it had always been for me since childhood. As the blood dripped down my body, I began to smile with glee. It had been a long time since I had felt any semblance of fear. The feeling was titillating, every fiber of my being roaring to life. I was ready, and so I began to plot my next move. Beads of sweat formed on my forehead. The night air was sticky and humid. Peering through a pair of night vision binoculars, the town lit up in a pale green light. Dragging deeply from a cigarette, I flicked embers onto the dirt, watching intently as they died out. 4 days earlier, I had made a big show and pretended to leave town. I made sure the whole town heard me, that everybody knew, no matter how much it hurt my pride. In the end though, my place in our town hierarchy would be etched in stone. I would be the savior of the saviorless, saving those undeserving of being saved. But I wasn't doing this to save lives. I never worked towards that end. My actions were selfish, born out of ego. Everything else was just a byproduct. Since I had taken watch, the town had been quiet. People left their homes only when necessary, stubbornly remaining in Slaughtersburg, unwavering in their desire not to be seen, as I now was. Notably, Zodiac and Bethany were missing, the only residents that I hadn't caught a glimpse of, other than the children, of course. After what I had experienced, I was undoubtedly sure that children had been enlisted to help carry out the killings. Even to a man such as myself, I found that to be unconscionable. Even worse, I perceived it as weak. It was also abundantly clear that this was an inside job. No outsider could be the mastermind behind the slayings. But to that end, I had no leads, not even the slightest notion. Granted, everybody was a suspect, because at the end of the day, we were all capable of terrible things in Slaughtersburg. A sudden burst of movement caught the corner of my eye. Quickly training my sights onto the location, I saw 3 young kids sneaking around the home belonging to Xavier the Butcher of Baltimore. Xavier was the only man in town who could compete with the brute strength of the Cincinnati maniac, having been a bodybuilder in his youth. In addition to his large muscular frame, Xavier was also highly intelligent, being one of the most well-read men I had ever met. He was much more concerned when it came to quality rather than quantity when it came to his prey. The world should be thankful for that. The children scattered to opposite sides of the home and began pelting the windows with small rocks. The light stayed off in Xavier's home. He was much too smart to take the bait. Simultaneously, the children snapped their heads eastwards, listening intently to the shadows. Someone else was there. It was then that one of the children removed their backpack and called over his compatriot. The child removed a glass bottle filled with liquid from the bag, a small wick protruding from a rubber stopper. Another child produced a Zippo lighter, igniting the wick a single flick. Craning his arm backward, the bottle was flung forward, shattering Xavier's window and creating a shower of flames. The fire quickly spread, engulfing the lower floor in an instant. On the second floor, I saw a window shatter as Xavier dove onto the ground below. He struggled mightily to get up, the impact clearly breaking his left leg and arm. They jutted out awkwardly to the side. At that moment, a figure cloaked in black emerged from sight unseen, walking slowly but with purpose. Motioning for the children, the 4 of them pulled out knives and fell onto Xavier like a pack of orcas onto a seal. They continued stabbing him for several minutes, coating their entire bodies in crimson. Their movements were almost primal, animalistic to a degree that even disturbed me. Like ducklings following their mother, after they were finished, the children followed the mystery man into the ravine stretching beyond Xavier's home and disappeared beyond my sightline. I remained calm and patient, waiting for them to reappear elsewhere. I was convinced that they had a home base in town, and if that was the case, it was only a matter of time before I spotted them. Only 20 minutes later, my deduction proved correct, as I spied the outside of Bethany's rundown 2-flat. The cloaked figure pulled out a key from their waistband, unlocking the front door and swiftly shepherding the group inside. That bitch. I should have known. I thought back to Bethany's performance outside of the general store. It was almost too obvious, just as I had been when I left town. What better way to throw off suspicion than to pretend you're a victim? Whether I liked it or not, I was impressed. I quickly filled a bag with various weapons and tools, and I made a beeline for Bethany's house, sticking to the shadows. Being the cautious type, it took me almost an hour to reach my destination, but patience had always been a virtue of mine. Pushing my body against Bethany's deck, I crept to the back of the house. If I knew Bethany, and I knew that I did, she had grown cocky and overconfident. Grasping the back door, I slowly turned the handle, and just as I suspected, it was unlocked. I had built psychological profiles on all the town's residents, and Bethany was one of the easiest to read. Drug addicts are creatures of habit unlike any other, and once again, I proved myself to be the superior being. As I entered the home, I heard giggling from upstairs, followed by Bethany's voice scolding someone for being loud. I steadied my 9mm police-issued pistol, and I snuck silently up the stairs onto the landing. Continued muffled laughter streamed from the far bedroom, Bethany once again shushing them into silence. A pale light was being casted from underneath the door, and I followed like a moth through the flame. A small keyhole sat underneath the handle, and I placed my left eye against it, squinting the other one was closed. It was then that I panicked. The room was empty, and sitting on a dirty wooden table was a laptop hooked up to a pair of speakers. This was a setup. Before I had time to react, a metal object struck me forcefully at the base of my skull. As I slipped into darkness, a familiar and gruff voice spoke. "The outcome of this match was determined from the start, but I'll commend you for trying. I look forward to when you wake up, although I don't imagine you'll have the same sentiments." A bucket of ice water brought me screaming back to consciousness. An unpleasant metallic taste lingered in my mouth as pain seared through my head. For a moment, I struggled like a fish flopping on dry land, but was unable to move. Heavy ropes were tied to my wrists and ankles, securing me tightly to a metal chair bolted to the ground. I was in a makeshift prison basement, about as common as you would imagine in Slaughtersburg. A row of 3 cells lined the back wall, each containing multiple occupied body bags. Metal chains and hooks descending from the ceiling, most of them bloodstained. To my left, a rusted tray with all sorts of instruments of torture sat patiently, what we serial killers refer to as toys. "Awake! He's awake!" A middle-aged boy screamed hoarsely as I awoke. His words were like a Neanderthal, like somebody just learning to speak. Several others quickly descended the stairs, skipping steps as children usually do. They grouped together and howled with excitement, jumping up and down with glee. Abruptly, they stopped in unison, turning towards me with devilish intent. Their smiles turned sinister, lips curled in such a way that would make even the hardest men shiver. Slowly, one step at a time, they closed in. They were teasing me, purposely prolonging every movement they made. I peered to my left, taking stock of every conceivable way that I could be mutilated. I was helpless, unable to move. But it was not fear that I felt at that moment. Far from it. It was shame. Complete and utter shame. To be killed was one thing, but to be thoroughly bested, that was another. My pride and ego, those were the only things that were important to me, and I had proven many times that I would do anything to keep them intact. I thought back to my first kill. I was 21. A starry-eyed brunette had mocked me in a pool hall, humiliated me by turning down my advances. I remembered the other patrons laughing, looking at me with pity. I vowed that would be the last time. When I caught up with her outside, she slashed me with a pocket knife before I was able to finish the job, a ritual that I've continued ever since. The power I felt from taking another life was orgasmic, addictive beyond anything you could comprehend. It's a feeling I've lustfully pursued for almost my entire adult life, because it was never about the killings. It was about the power, the domination, the need to be feared and not pitied. Now that was once again being stripped from me, I was no better than a helpless infant. As I pontificated about life, the murderous youth surrounded me. The youngest child, a little girl with pink ribbons in her hair, gleefully picked up a screwdriver from the tray next to me. With a surprisingly swift hand, she plunged the screwdriver into my thigh, laughing like a deranged psychopath. I held my lips together tightly, vowing to show no signs of weakness or pain. Next, a portly boy around 7 grabbed a nail gun and pointed it at my feet. All told, he put 3 nails into my foot, one piercing completely through my big toe. But still, I remained silent, unwavering in my resolution to stay strong until the end. Finally, the oldest boy grabbed a serrated knife and held it to my neck. He looked deeply into my eyes, something even most killers can't do to their victims, although they never admit it. As I tried to make peace with my devils, an assertive voice boomed from the top of the stairs. "Enough, children. He's had enough. There are others in town who I would like you to play with." Like cockroaches in the light, the children scattered, scurrying up the stairs. "I was wondering if you would show up. I didn't think you had the balls." I put extra emphasis on the latter part, drawing out every syllable. With serene confidence, Zodiac sauntered down the stairs, smile beaming with joy. He looked 10 years younger, eyes full of vigor and life. He wasn't shaking. He didn't seem frail. In fact, he seemed the picture of vitality. It was oddly delightful to see him in such a state. "I bet you didn't know I was the originator behind the founding of Slaughtersburg. But don't you worry, nobody knows. I made sure of that. There's a lot of things people don't know about this town. Complacency really is the devil's ally." Zodiac pulled his fingers through his matted salt and pepper hair, pausing for a moment to let the words sink in. "Those children, they are the forgotten ones, the untouchables. Have you ever imagined what their lives must be like? Their parents are monsters outside of the home, and let me tell you, it's no better inside. They weren't part of my plan originally, but I quickly saw their value, and in turn they saw mine." He sounded like a preacher delivering a sermon to the flock. "You're telling me you planned this all along? What a crock of shit. You got lucky, old man. You just got tired of being this useless old shit and decided this was the way to prove yourself. You're pathetic." I spit wildly in his direction, not even coming close to my target. "Your fake bravado doesn't fool me. Oh no, not one bit. I pity you, Sam. I truly do. I can only imagine what it must feel like to be bested to such a degree. It's humiliating, isn't it?" The Zodiac spoke down to me like a child struggling in class. I seethed with anger, the rage rushing through my body with a burning intensity. But on the surface, I remained calm. The Zodiac pulled a large buck knife from his pocket, the same knife that had been embedded in my door. He approached me cautiously, but rather than cut me, he cut the ropes tying my wrists and then ankles. And then with forceful pulls, he removed the screwdriver and nails his little monsters had stabbed me with. I tried to leap from my chair, but my legs gave away and I tumbled to the ground. "You will not die tonight. Not by our hands. Death isn't a punishment for you. Life is. You see, I know you, Sam, better than you know yourself. I know what makes you tick. This is the last time that I'll think of you. Too bad you won't be able to say the same." And with that, he strode away, not even looking back. I could have given chase, attempted to throw a sharp object his way, but I didn't even try. I simply lay there crying like a baby, the cold ground my one and only comfort. I remained there the rest of the night, unmoving. I heard many things as I lay on that cold floor. Screams of pain and agony, gunfire, explosions, the crackling of fire. But it meant nothing to me. My insides were in complete disarray, my mind engulfed in the flames of self-pity and defeat. Eventually, I got up, limping up the stairs and out of the door. I barely took heed to the carnage surrounding me, burned down homes and mutilated bodies. Like a zombie, I meandered through the remains of Slaughtersburg, walking with no purpose. That was 10 years ago, give or take. I haven't been on a single hunt since that day. I am undeserving of that life. My existence is now what you would call normal. A job, a wife, a dog, a kid. It's more horrible than you can imagine. Every day, I am told what a piece of shit I am, either by work or by family, and I just sit there and take it. It's what I'm owed. Today, I opened up my mailbox to find my name, crudely drawn on a foul-smelling package. I remembered that smell. It was decomposing flesh. Inside the box was a man's left hand, bone and muscle clearly visible beneath the skin. Underneath the hand was a crumpled piece of paper. I greedily grabbed for it. As I unfolded it, a simple message greeted me. In case you forgot, love Z.